Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. So, we're about a half hour before the close here. I'm really not anticipating doing anything else. So, I thought I'd go ahead and just do the weekend update at this time. So, we continue to move forward. Again, great series of trades here. We also have some nice open trades that we should be closing before too long. We'll take a look at those in just a second. So this is the equity curve. Of course, this is the bar chart of those wins and losses. And this is, of course, the list of those respective trades, with this one just closing out here this week. And I think we just closed, no, Meta was last week. So we just closed this one this week for about a 10% profit in 28 days. So anyhow, that's kind of where we are on our open trades, or excuse me, on our closed trades. Let's take a look now at our open trades, and we'll talk about those just a moment. So the open trades, we have 4 of them at this point. And this one is perfectly fine, not really needing anything. We have little to no upside risk on it. I mean, we technically do have a little bit of risk, but not much. And our markets run really hard. We're going to take a look at a market analysis here in a moment and talk about, why I'm not in a huge rush to adjust this. So this trade does have a slight amount of negative delta, which, again, in my opinion, I feel we're a little overextended and, likely due for a stall or a little bit of a pullback. Then we have the calendar that's 2 weeks out. It started as just a put calendar. Yesterday, after the huge run up, we added in a call calendar. So again, normally I'd like to try to keep these to a single calendar, just because they decay a little bit faster. But again, yesterday we had a huge run in the market. It opened higher this morning. So I felt it was prudent to at least flatten out our upside risk a little bit in that trade. So hindsight, it would have been better had I not done that this morning, but it's okay. I think it's starting to decay nicely, and we'll be fine there. On our rut trade, we did tighten these wings up. We rolled the right wing up and the left wing up. So this trade is now firmly in the no lose trade camp. There's nothing that could happen on this trade that would cause a loss. So what I am looking for, or maybe hoping for here, is as we get closer to expiration, another 10 days out, that this is going to, of course, mound up. Our T0 line is. At that point, if we do get a pullback, this can add a fair amount of profit into that trade. And even if the market were to totally tank and collapse, yes, we would give up certainly some nice gains. This would not go into a losing position. At the absolute worst case scenario, it would be $1,100 or $1,200 winner. Now, I certainly would not want to give back that $1,000, and we will try to manage that accordingly. But I think it's a relatively low risk at this point. The market would have to drop, the rut would have to drop, 100 points in order for this to really start accelerating to the downside. And that's a pretty tall order for the rut. It doesn't tend to move, quite that dramatically. So this particular trade is a little bit of a problem child right now. But it's not, I've got mixed feelings on this. So if we look at take off our adjustment. So this is where this trade is. It's got nice negative delta to it, which again, I kind of like given where we're at in the market right now. But what I will show you in a minute when we take a look at the SPX is I'm a little perplexed that the market hasn't sold off more here today when they basically announced that people walked away from the debt ceiling talks. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. And the fact that our market didn't really drop much on that news is kind of showing me some serious relative strength here. So a possible adjustment. Now, I'm not going to propose that I make this today. I'd like to wait until next week, Monday, Tuesday, and then see where we're at. And that can certainly cost me more money. I mean, the market could rally up another, 50 points, and then I'm going to be down significantly more in this trade. But I'm kind of counting on the fact that we're maybe a little topped out right now, even though the market's very strong. But what I would look at doing is potentially doing what's called butterflying off our top end. So that essentially means that we're adding a butterfly in here, but that butterfly we're adding in is adjusting one of the prior butterflies. And it gives us a P&L diagram that looks like this. This would flatten our deltas a fair amount. Again, I still want to maintain a little bit of a negative delta personally, just because I feel like we're a little overextended. And a couple of our other trades are flat or positive delta. So this will maybe help balance those other trades a little bit as well. So, but if we do make this adjustment, while we are widening our tent and we're reducing our upside risk a little bit, we are taking on some downside risk in exchange. So I'm not, again, proposing that I'm not going to make this trade here today. But next week, this may be a trade I would consider here as a way of potentially managing this position if we don't get a sizable pullback. Again, in the ideal world, we get a pullback of 100 S&P points, which certainly can happen in a day. And then this trade goes back to being nicely profitable, and we maybe thin out one of our butterflies. So now if we look at the market itself right now, if we look at the SPX, again, I was expecting that we were going to hit some overhead here in this 4,200, 4,150 to 4,200 range. We did hit a little overhead here. We are pulling back a little bit today. And I would consider that kind of normal and customary, and then chopping sideways would be normal and customary. But at the same time, I also would have thought that the breakdown in the debt ceiling talks, I would have thought would have put this back down here below the low of yesterday, below this 4150. So the fact that the market isn't really selling off here with that pretty negative news, it just shows me some additional strength. We're also here almost to the market close, and we can see that while the market's down a little bit, the volume is not really down much, or excuse me, it's not really up much. So that down move is not happening on higher volume. So there's less conviction to the downside, less people fearing the downside or selling out because of a downside concern. So anyhow, that's kind of my thoughts on SPX. But let's take a look at RUT real quick too, since we have that one RUT position. Now, same thing kind of holds true here. So, RUT ran up really hard, opened about the same place the next day, then ran up really hard, then gapped open this morning. Since that time, it sold off a little more than the others, but it still hasn't sold off below yesterday's low. And it could continue to sell off a little bit more here today, but I don't see it with 20 minutes left now. I don't see it accelerating to where it's going to go below yesterday's low. And even if it does, I don't think it's going to go below it by much. So again, this is a sign of relative strength from my perspective. So I would expect RUT to probably largely chop. I mean, if it did sell off a little more, probably down here into the 1750 range. So 1750 to 1800 is kind of the range I would expect there. And that plays perfectly for our RUT trade. Again, if we come look specifically at the RUT trade, that pullback to 1750 as we get further into this trade and our T0 starts to mound up here a little bit, that will just add a little bit more profit into this trade. Again, we're not going to squeeze a whole lot more out of this, but there's also not really any significant risk to where we need to pull it off. I'm okay riding this one closer to expiration at this point. So anyhow, we've got 4 decent trades. One very decent, one little subjective right now, a little dicey. I think this one will be just fine. I think this one will be just fine. This won't be a high profit trade, but we should be able to pull 10% out of that over the next few weeks. So that's kind of where we're at for the weekend update. As always, any questions, please post them in the group for me, and I'll be happy to take a closer look and get a response back to you. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a great weekend.